I can remember Mr. and Mrs. Marsh here. Mrs. Marsh was quite a stout lady, I think, if I can put, and Mr. Marsh was a sort of elderly farmer, and their son, Richard Marsh, who we knew quite well. I'm not sure if he's still alive. He moved off to Derbyshire, but I can remember them farming here. Half their farm was on the Wood estate and belonged to the Yateses on the left, but the other half of the farm was on the Bradford estate and was this land that goes down the bank down to White Ladies. So they had this, I remember my father always said it was a very strange situation where they had one farm. It was Boscobel Farm, but it actually belonged to two estates.
So how far did the Boscobel farm stretch then?
It stretched down to White Ladies.
Right.
It was neighbouring to us. We were farming at White Ladies. It's the road that divides it.
The road divides it, okay.
On the left, that's,
right.
And round the Royal Oak, that's Yates's, and on the right is the Bradford estate. So it was a very unusual farm because it had, if you like, two bits to it. And of course across there where the house is, that was where he kept his sheep. And that was the big sort of the sheep area there. He was quite a big sheep farmer. But I also remember Dutch barns across there where those cones are.
In the car park now.
There was a big Dutch barn there where they stored all the crops, of course.
So that's fairly near that little pond of water?
Yes, that's right, on the front of the pond of water. Yeah. And I can remember that they milked cows at one point. They used to bring cows into these sheds and milk them by hand. I think the dairy was up the far end.
So we're going round towards where the sort of cafeteria is today?
Yes, that's right. I would think that's where the dairy was. And they lived in this piece here, didn't they?
So the first house here, the first part of the house, basically.
I think the front door was on the side there. Me and my three little brothers, we would be invited up here for tea with the Marshes, and Mrs. Marsh would give us a tea somewhere in one of those rooms there. And then we'd be allowed to come into the parlour. Now, that's what I remember about the parlour. The parlour was virtually empty of furniture.
So just to recap, where was this door then that you were talking about?
This would have been their front door, I'm sure.
Where we're going into the visitor entrance today. Okay.
Yeah. And I think that would have linked through into the piece that they lived in. There would have been a door there of some sort.
Okay, which has now got the panels on it.
You can't get from here to there now, can you? That's a separate house. I'm sure this is where we came in. And then we'd be allowed, I think this part of the house was largely empty.
This is the 1595 section now.
And their job was, if people were interested, they'd have to show them round here as the place where Charles hid. But it was quite okay for us to come in here as guests. And into this room.
We're going into the parlour now, the actual, what's called the parlour today.
Yeah, now the great thing about this room for small boys was that there was virtually no furniture in here. It was a great historical, but we weren't too bothered about that. But what we absolutely loved was the oak floorboards, which we could slide about on. So we would actually, can you believe, English Heritage have a fit now. We were allowed to play in here and used to have games. And, I can remember that. I must have been only 5, 6, 7. And I can just remember what a great place this was to play in.
It's part of the life of the house, though. It's part of its story, isn't it?
It's part of its story, yeah. Because there was no carpet here, probably these big pieces of furniture weren't here. But yeah, I can actually remember that. Those oak floorboards, because they were slidey. You could sit on them and push each other.
They still are. We could have a game now.
We could have a game now, yeah, if we weren't as old as we are.
Yeah, no.
And of course, there's a bit too much furniture in here now. But it's amazing when I come in here. I can just remember that. So I think these two rooms, the Marshes used to bring visitors if they were interested, including, of course, King George VI came here, didn't he, during the war, and he would have been brought in here. I don't know whether the Marshes were here then. Possibly they were. This was only 10 years after that. We're talking 1955 or something like that. And I think it was part of the tenancy, or the part of the occupancy of the house, that they had to show people these rooms.
Yeah, because it was 1954 when the Ministry of Works took Boscobel House. So this time that you're talking about, around that sort of period?
Yes, that's right. Oh, yeah. So, it was 1954, right, okay. So who would have been responsible for this house before 1954? It would have been part of
the Bradford estate, wasn't it?
Part of the Bradford estate, okay. So it must have been part of the tenancy agreement. They had to show people around. Yeah. But I do remember being told by my parents that we couldn't come up anymore and slide about on this floor. So there must have been somewhere around 54, 55 when.
Well, that fits, doesn't it?
When the Ministry of Works decided it wasn't a good idea.
We don't want young Parry sliding around here, do we, anymore?
So, because this is a very historic room, isn't it? But when you're 5, that wasn't the issue really. It was the slidiness of the floor.
It's lovely. I think it's part of the story. I really do. I think actually the house has been lived in, loved, used, in all sorts of different ways, and that's part of it, isn't it?
Yeah. I don't know how long that arrangement had been. That the tenant, the people who lived here, had to just show people round.
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? Because you actually, we've got the Boscobel chest here, which of course is said to have been made from the original oak. But really, after 1660, people are coming to see this as a tourist attraction. So you could argue that's just part of that story, that really from 1660 onwards, there's a steady stream of people.
Interested people.
Yeah.
But bear in mind that all changed in 1685 when Charles died. And then, of course, you had all the rumpus with James coming to the throne. And I think interest in Boscobel fell off from 1685 onwards. And I don't think it was anything like as popular during the 1700s and the early 1800s as it is now. I think it was actually the Evans sisters who reinvented Boscobel. That's how I see it. Yeah. They obviously demolished the wall, was probably looking a bit untidy around the tree. They researched the story of the tree. They researched the story of the house.
It makes a great deal of sense, doesn't it? What you were just saying there, really, after 1685, and certainly after the fall of the Stuarts.
Yeah.
Would you be so interested in the story of Charles II? Well, no. Probably not, because it's no longer perhaps part of the national narrative in quite the same way. And then actually the Evans sisters, in falling in love with the story and having the means to be able to restore the place, then bring it into a sort of condition which makes it worth visiting again.
That's right. I think that's what had happened. Because I think you have to remember, by the time he died, people had fallen out of love with Charles II. He was great when he came back as king, but there was a lot of problems with Charles II.
And it's 25 years on as well, isn't it? That's another thing, The story's fresh and hot in
That's
1660.
Right. But so I think the number of visitors who came here fell off quite a lot in the late 1600s. The old part of Shackley, we think, was built in the late 1500s, early 1600s, and it's where the Yates family lived. There, Francis Yates and his wife, he was married to a Pendrell daughter, and they're actually the Yates family who now own the estate, but a few generations later, and they lived in this old house at Shackley, which has identical floorboards to this. It's just amazing if you went to see them. I'd forgotten how similar they are, oak floorboards. And they were the ones, when he was hiding in spring coppice in the wood, it was Mrs. Yates who took him some food and some dry clothing because he got very wet there. And he was hungry as well.
And he was hungry. I think he was constantly hungry. Yeah.
Well, he was. He'd had a pretty bad night, through the.
And Francis Yates actually accompanied him to Moseley, didn't he?
Yes, Francis Yates was one of those, because they went on Humphrey's horse, and Francis Yates it was the five Pendrell brothers, and Francis Yates who escorted him with their pikes, and if he'd been attacked, they'd have defended him to the end, I think, and the famous line that he records is that when he saw this lady bringing him some food and clothing. He said, "You're a woman, will you betray me?" And she said, "I'd rather lose my life than betray you, King." And they're just amazing family that they rallied, because they were in tremendous danger from that. I mean, it would have been a grisly end for them. And I take my hat off to the Pendrells. And they did it without question. He turned up on their doorstep on that Thursday morning. They didn't know, it wasn't on the news or anything about the Battle of Worcester. They didn't know what had happened. But no question at all, they all came together. They put together a plan, like bringing him up the bank, hiding him in the tree, taking him to Moseley. Brilliant.
They escorted him, didn't they? They basically guided him.
They guided him. They knew they couldn't stop here. They guided him to Moseley, and he was able to get down to Bristol and away to France. So I just think that the courage of the Pendrells is extraordinary. Not just the courage, but the ability to react to a situation, which you can't teach people. It's just...
There's no rehearsal for that.
There's no rehearsal for that, no. It was just inbred into them. And of course this idea that they were Catholics, and the idea that Charles, because his mother was a Catholic, because Henrietta Maria was a Catholic, that he would be sympathetic to the Catholics. And of course he was, and of course there's this story that he Father Huddleston converted him to Catholicism on his deathbed. Whether or not that was true, I don't know, but the rumour is that he died a Catholic, so interesting, isn't it?